We are live. Welcome back to our continuing series where we talk to professors on the left, on the right, on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in the middle, in the North, and the South, reporters, activists, anybody who can talk intelligently about the nature of political division in America today. With us today, it's our privilege to have Professor Stanley Ridgley. All right, Ridgley, he's a clinical professor of management at the Laval College of Business at Drexel University. He's also author of a book we're going to get to, Brutal Minds, The Dark World of Left-Wing Brainwashing in Our Universities. 1 second. Oh, sorry. Okay. Here's the professor. This is a copy of the book. We're going to get into that. Here we go. The professor is a clinical full professor of management at Drexel University's Laval College of Business. The doctor has also studied at Moscow State University and the Institut de Gestion Sociale in Paris. He's a former military intelligence officer who served in West Berlin and near the Czech-German border, where he received the George S. Patton Award for Leadership from the 7th Army Academy. Wow. In addition to his teaching, the doctor lectures widely in the United States and internationally. He's Drexel's faculty sponsor for Turning Point USA, serves on Drexel's faculty senate and on Drexel's University Institutional Review Board. He's a frequent contributor to national media, including Newsmax. My stepdad loves that show, and American Greatness, and is also the highly praised faculty instructor for the course Strategic Thinking and the DVD series, thegreatcourses.com. He has a PhD in international relations from Duke University, master's in international business from Temple University, a background in journalism, and a background in Russian defense in Russian from the Defense Language Institute, also a very reputable school. So won the 2005 Mooser Award for Leadership, the 93 Robert Wilson Instructor of Political Science, and the 1984 George S. Patton Award for Leadership. These are some of the questions that we're going to get into with the book. But before we do that, let's check in. Professor, did I get anything wrong? Is there something we need to correct now?
No, I think you that about sums it up, and you quite a wonderful reading of it.
Thank you.
I enjoyed that immensely.
You're gonna have to forgive me, I bet we're trying to get my windows straight. All right, let's get right into the meat and potatoes, because you and I were already talking before, and we were really hitting it off. I found this book to be very prescient and relevant. Before I read the official description, let's play a game. This is one of my favorite games. You and I are in an elevator. You have 2 minutes, and only 2 minutes. You're never going to see me again. What is this a book about, and why should I bother to pick it up and read it after our talk in the elevator?
Well, I'd say the book is about the decline of higher education in America, and if you care about America's future, then you probably want to know what the cause of this decline is, because our youth basically are our future. And what is causing this decline? Who is causing this decline? Where is this decline occurring? What does it look like? Who are the culprits in causing this decline? And I should say that the main culprit are those who would brainwash our next generation, utilizing thought reform programming and technique that was developed in this country, adopted by the Communist Chinese, by the North Koreans, and still being used today with American-style cults and by certain groups on America's college campuses. Yes, I said that. Thought reform meaning brainwashing. Those techniques are indeed being used, and I'm pleased to describe them and to get into it and answer any of your questions about that. But that's what Brutal Minds is about. Most important, I think, it tells us what we can do about it, how students can defend themselves, how parents can become aware and become part of the process, and how we can turn that ship around and stop the thought reform brainwashing that's going on our college campuses.
We're going to go to the next segment called Talk to Me Like I'm 5 years old and I've been in a cave for 10 years. Political polarization, is that an issue? I thought universities were places of balanced thinking, and it's okay for students to be exposed to new ideas. Aren't students supposed to learn new and uncomfortable ideas? And have their minds challenged? Or are you saying that that traditional Socratic form has been modified into something more weaponized, I think?
Well, it depends upon which part of the university you're talking about.
Please.
If you're talking about academic affairs, which is the department that I work in and all faculty work in, and this is what most people off the campuses think of when they think of the university, they think of the faculty. And we really only have students in our classes from 3, maybe 4 hours a week. Over on the other side of campus is what is called student affairs. And this is where most of the mischief occurs. Now, these folks who I say are causing most of the mischief are more than happy to allow left-wing faculty, such as they are on the college campus, take the hit and take the heat with respect to attacks on higher education and how we can go about reforming it. When these poor guys and gals who are, left wingers on our college campuses, most of them wouldn't know how to brainwash someone, even if they knew how to do it. And most of them are clumsy with respect to their pedagogy and how they try to change people's minds in the classroom. Most of them are just hardworking people, smart people trying to do their research, do their teaching, and do their service. Over on what I call the soft side of campus, folks with, I generally think, are soft-minded people who have been brainwashed themselves by an ideology that is noxious, that seeks to transform the university from a crucible of knowledge preservation, of knowledge generation, and passing on the best that has been thought and said to the subsequent generations so that they can then add their bits of knowledge to this growing repository of legitimate knowledge, pushing back the darkness. Instead of that, the left wingers, the far left, the folks who are in student affairs and their fellow travel faculty, such as they are trying to modify the university. Their motto is boldly transforming higher education. That's very bold. That's a very bold and very explicit goal to boldly. Well, what are they trying to change it to? Well, they're trying to change it into a repository of Marxist ideology, basically a lockstep ideology where the truth is already received, that we're not going to explore these different ideas of truth. We're not going to entertain diversity of thought. The university is a place where we can train cadres for the struggles of the future, the Marxist struggles of the future. These are quotes that are not that I had to find to dig to find. This is what they say all the time. Brutal Minds quotes these folks. It names these folks. It names where they work. It tells what their goals are. And I can tell you that much of the noxious dross that appears on our college campus has its source in our schools of education, which were taken over by Marxist ideologues and activists many years ago, accelerating in the 21st century. When I say Marxist, I'm not calling them names. I'm simply giving them respect of what they call themselves. I'm talking about Michael Apple, Ira Shore, Henry Giroux, Bell Hooks, on into today's people, Peter McLaurin, Zeus Leonardo, and the list goes on and on. Cheryl Matias, Ricky Lee Allen, and I can name the schools as well. These are all people who are self-professed Marxists, who are critical theorists, which is another way of saying I'm a neo-Marxist. They acknowledge this as well. And they look to this as the guiding principles of the way that all of the university should be run. And this all has it's a wellspring in colleges, schools of education. I should go ahead and say that education schools are really not the highest caliber of what we would expect on the university. They are in effect the bottom feeders and the cash cows of universities that want to bring in a lot of revenue. And this was fine until education school folks decided they're going to create advanced degrees to fill the bureaucracies with their graduates, advanced degrees in student affairs administration, higher education management, higher education administration. Now, these people are being trained to be bureaucrats to come right back onto the college campus and begin to sow the seeds of this generalized Marxist quasi-revolution.
So I think to summarize, there is a long-term criticism, and I think you acknowledge that, of leftist professors, right?
Yep.
Brainwashing. But it sounds like you're saying maybe that's there, but that's not really the problem. The problem isn't these professors, even if they are leftists. The problem is these student affairs directors who aren't even professors, who don't even have a degree in, let's say, so, because there's a lot of leftist professors in sociology and psychology, but those are hard disciplines to learn that you can get a job with and are based upon science. You're talking about somebody who has a degree in administration. They're not really teaching kind of like a science thing or a soft science to the kids. They have a degree in bureaucracy, and then they go back. And so it's like, it's not even the real academic teachers. It's not really the real knowledge givers who are doing this. It's kind of a administrative, bureaucratic, second-class lecturer series, who's the thrust of this. Is that fair?
You pretty much nailed it better than I did, I think. In fact,
trying to understand.
I like your turn of phrase there, degree in bureaucracy, which is, I may take that. I'll give you credit. They have degrees in bureaucracy, the degrees that, and it's a kind of a upselling their position, upselling what they do. They want to be thought of as being professionals. They call themselves higher education professionals, and they call themselves college educators. Now, these folks who come back into the university, they assume roles in the bureaucracy, clerks, enrollment managers, advisors, dorm room managers, people who assign dorm rooms. And you say to yourself, well, why is this a problem? That they have these advanced degrees. Well, they're all being trained to become what are called scholar practitioners, or to engage in what they call praxis, meaning I'm going to live my values and I'm going to utilize my position, regardless of what it is. I'm going to utilize my position to boldly transform the university in ways that undercut and undermine the university from my position of limited power. And so what you've got is, and there are books and articles that train people how to become what they call tempered radicals, which means that you utilize your position as an enrollment manager to advance social justice, or a position as a clerk or a coordinator or a dorm room, or like I should say, a dormitory manager, res life manager. I'm going to put on seminars to train people up in social justice, to show white students that they are inherently oppressors, and to deal with people of color, to tell them that they're victims, whether they want to be victims or not. And this is the mindset. They actually say professors have the students maybe 3 to 4 hours a week. We have them 24/7 because we control the environment. And they have a term for this. It's called milieu management. That's their term. They want to control or manage the milieu in all of higher education, so that they message students 24/7 on bulletin boards and dining halls, certainly in the residence halls, and in these off-the-cuff seminars that are part of what they call the co-curriculum. And the natural question is, wait a minute, what is this co-curriculum? And I always ask people, have you ever heard of the co-curriculum? And the co-curriculum is basically a fake curriculum manufactured by non-faculty, but it's made to look like courses. They're made to look like professors. They offer fake courses under fake professors, and they give fake transcripts at certain places. Rutgers, St. John's, Westchester University, they all give fake transcripts. It's like a facsimile of the real thing without the benefits of the real thing, because the people who populate and teach in this co-curriculum are not faculty. They're not vetted as teachers. They certainly have no subject matter knowledge other than what they learn off the campus in institutes that train them up to be smart in critical pedagogy and critical racialist theory. So it's a kind of a situation where, yes, the campus has lots of leftist professors to the tune of 6-to-1 in a ratio liberal to conservative. That's true. That's the way it's been for a long time. That's a problem, but it is not the main problem that I address in Brutal Minds. We can get to that, that imbalance in liberal to conservative professors, the imbalance in the bureaucracy, which has grown massively in the last 25 years, first quarter century of this century, is 12-to-1 liberal to conservative. I'll say that again, 12-to-1 liberal to conservative in the bureaucracy. And I think you understand why this is important given all of this co-curricular activity I just described. If you want to find out for yourself where the 6-to-1 and the 12-to-1 disparities come from, it's from the research by my colleague, Dr. Samuel Abrams at Sarah Lawrence College. That research is current as of about 2 years ago.
That's fascinating. And while you were talking, I was putting it up on the background for people to see. Careers in higher education, post-secondary education administrator, 100,000, provost, 167,000, dean of students, 71, college or university registrar, 64,000. And then here it is. What is the field of higher education? Basically, masters in education leadership or organizational learning and leadership. And here's another one. Springer Link is a very popular research. Yeah. And here's an article for 2017, pretty recent. Higher education professionals, a growing profession.
Yeah.
Followed by
they love to call themselves higher education professionals. They call themselves college educators. Here's what they like to do. They like to say, well, you have the faculty over here and you have student affairs over there. And people tend to look down on student affairs, well, with good reason, because they're basically ancillary support staff. But what they've done is they've managed to, well, let's take it up a notch and let's call faculty college educators, and then we'll call ourselves college educators. And then we begin to refer to college educators, whether they're faculty or student affairs professionals, higher educational professionals. And in this way, they upsell themselves and try to convince others that they are what they are really not. And they all serve, not in the faculty, but they serve in this co-curriculum, which again, does not have any kind of diversity of thought. The co-curriculum is, and the people that teach in it, the people who aspire to teach in it, the people who run these seminars are 95% ideologically lockstep with critical theory, which is another name for Marxism. And let me interject here as well and say, well, how can you say this, Dr. Ridgley? He said, well, you know, education schools were captured ideologically by Marxists many years ago. And it's continued to permeate the faculty and the doctrines in education school to the point where critical ideology, critical pedagogy are the mainstays of how they teach teachers to teach. And I'm talking about the ones who go down K through 12, and I'm also talking about those who are training to be bureaucrats. They take advanced degrees in bureaucracy. They're all trained to be critical theorists. And this is, like I said, it's a very pretty word for Marxists. It's a kind of it's critical theory was developed by the Frankfurt School of neo-Marxists, and they decided to call it critical theory. And this you can check on this. I think I put this in Brutal Minds as well. They made it up. They decided to call their brand of neo-Marxism critical theory to avoid the pejorative political connotations that come with being a Marxist. And even more so in education schools today, you'll very seldom hear the M word used. Instead, you'll find critical theory, critical pedagogy, which to the average person sounds, it just sounds kind of the vernacular of academics.
Yeah. Benign.
And they have a pantheon of thinkers and leaders and theoreticians. And the number one theoretician is, before I tell you his name, here's why they chose this guy. So we can't say Marx. We just can't do that. It's just too unpalatable. No one's going to come to our education school if we say we are teaching neo-Marxist theory, education theory. We've got to find, like Al Capone found someone to launder his dirty money. They found a theorist in the late 70s and early 80s. They found someone to launder their dirty Marxist theory. And his name is Paulo Freire. He's a Brazilian. And he wrote a famous book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, published in 1970. And this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is like the iconic centerpiece of their pantheon of literature. And so he's Brazilian, he's an educator, but he was a Marxist. He became a Marxist in the 1960s, and he was known to praise the Cultural Revolution of Mao Zedong's China. He praised Lenin, he praised Stalin, but he reserved most of his praise for Mao Zedong, who killed about 1.5 to 2 million people during the 10-year Cultural Revolution, where most people who were tortured or killed lost 10 years of their lives with this kind of monstrous revolution that decided upturned and overturned society, destroying the country's history, very much like 10 years of the summer of 2020, what we experienced in the summer of 2020.
Mm.
Well, Paulo Freire and his Freirean ideas, which are all cribbed from Mao's education theory, he became the conduit through which Marxist theory is laundered. I want people to understand that. When you hear Paulo Freire or critical theory or the idea of critical consciousness, which is his contribution to the Marxist pantheon of vernacular. Critical consciousness means that you have adopted or embraced the Marxist view of society and the progression of history. So that in a nutshell is, to go back to your original question, is that, yes, many of the faculty are indeed left-wingers, but that's not a really, it's a problem from my perspective, of course, but it's not the problem that we should be focused
on. The problem. The problem is this other group that aren't really the main educators. They're administrators or
exactly.
Teach administration.
Right. And they utilize their access to students in performing basically malfeasance. I mean, if you're an enrollment manager, you need to make sure that students are enrolled in the right courses. If you're an academic advisor, your job, you meet with a student once, maybe twice a year. Your job is to ensure, and they're in that 30-minute meeting, that student is enrolled in the right courses.
Right.
Overall, students should be healthy, housed, happy, and fed. That's the job of these ancillary staff.
Seems
but
basic.
they are upselling themselves, and they're taking it upon themselves to become higher education professionals. And they're the only ones who call themselves that. And they are really overreaching to a deleterious degree. And they are responsible, I think, for this decline in higher education and this left-wing cant that is a cancer in the university and can be solved if we turn our attention from my beloved faculty colleagues on the left and focus on the people who are actually doing the dirty deed on the campuses, these student affairs administrators.
It seems like it'd be easier to clean that up because they're not the core faculty themselves. Like, right, we don't have to cut out all the sociology, psychology, art history professors. You're talking about a kind of a separate class of people who teach very boutique degrees, hotel management, public policy management, higher education discipline. I could see that. We'll come back to it, but where does the title of the book come from?
The title of the book,
I'm sorry. And before you answer, Professor, why did you pick that? What was it where you're like, what's the title of the book, and why did that scream to you as the appropriate title for this concept?
Well, these types of persons who are trying to undermine the university and to at the same time, obtain the prestige that accrues to people who are involved with the university. This is nothing new for the 21st century. This has been going on for many, many years. Ever since the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution in the 1600s and the 1700s expunged much of the superstition and pseudoscience and magical thinking from the university. And universities embraced the idea that we're going to create legitimate knowledge. This kind of goes, kind of circles around Isaac Newton and his discoveries and the amazing laws that he discovered. And building around that, we found a new respectability of accruing to science. We found the new profession of scientists, the idea of rigorous, systematic inquiry into the nature of things, that we can perhaps in a way systematically catalog the world around us, and we can push back the shadows of what previously was thought of as magic and the darkness thing, things like we're going to search for the philosopher's stone. No, we're not going to
Okay.
do that anymore. No, we're not going to believe in alchemy and astrology. And so it's a matter of value judgments and placing value on certain disciplines and expunging other nonsense from the university. And that is seen that, and we have seen the greatest progression of human beings in existence in terms of our life expectancy, in terms of the way we live, in terms of cheap and inexpensive clothing to get mundane, in terms of life sustaining medicines. All of this are products of the university, either directly or indirectly. And that what has happened is a lot of prestige accrues to people who work in the university because of that. The people who actually produce that kinds of knowledge, whether it's in my own business school or whether it's in STEM, in computer science, whether it's in physics, what we think of with the quantum physics, the higher level disciplines, and you find a kind of inferiority complex in a case of envy from those who work in labor in the liberal arts, the humanities, and they want to be thought of as worthy as well. And of course they are. But what we find is that a lot of folks who aren't faculty want to be thought of as university people. And they want that kind of prestige. They don't want to be thought of as ancillary staff, support staff, the folks who keep the pizza hot and make sure that the sound system works on karaoke night. That kind of thing. They want more. They hanker for more. And so they created this entire fake curriculum where they can actually teach seminars and they can pretend to be faculty. And the students who, God bless them, they don't know any better. I mean, they're just listening to the person in the front of the room. And so when I'm thinking about all the skein of history, all the brutal minds who have come and gone in and out of the university, I think that the word brutal in terms of intellectual brutality fits these people to a T. We've seen this in history before. We saw in Nazi Germany in 1933, the night where 25,000 books were taken out and burned. Very famous photographs. And you'll find that photograph on my website in my description of Brutal Minds, that these are the people who burn books. These are the people who believe that they have access to a truth that is denied to other people. And the only way that these other people can embrace their truth would be to accept the arguments. And this is what they call critical consciousness. Well, the folks who mouth critical consciousness, the folks who talk about Paulo Freire and neo-Marxism, these are brutal people because they are the ones who are engaged in attacking our students. They are the ones who are imposing brainwash sessions on our students, who are basically attacking our students and trying to change their belief system to something that is more palatable to the ones who are in charge of student affairs and their sometimes faculty, fellow travelers in sociology and places like that, social work, things like that. But yes, there is a brainwash on the campus, and anyone who is going to engage in trying to brainwash someone or engage in a thought reform program is indeed, I call, a brutal mind. I don't really think much of these people at all, and I'm not afraid of saying that.
That seems like a sort of a brute force intellectual attack like Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution, I think in the 60s, where they re-energized the communist idea in the youth and they kind of took it too far. And then I think you had Pol Pot in Cambodia when he was trying to institute a revolution there where they would take people out of the villages and then they would separate the kids from the parents and they would go, well, there is no such thing as family. Right. There's the state. And then there's you. And they would literally force each one to believe this dogmatically. They didn't really explain it. They just go, this is what it is. You're expected to believe this.
Well, the nuclear family is the great enemy of those who would recraft society in a Marxist way. Again, they're not going to say Marxist, but at root, at bottom, it's always Marxist because there's only so many ways that you can structure society. There's at the extremes, there's individualist visions, what we have here in the United States for the most part, and then collectivist visions, which is basically the most sophisticated of the lot, would be Marx's vision for a collectivist society. And I'll tell you what, this is a very intoxicating doctrine that these folks are expounding, because number one, it's simple to understand, and number two, it really caters to a sense of narcissism and grandiosity, that these folks are privy to the secrets of history. They've been unlocked, and Marx was always talking about it, unlocking the secrets of history, following up along I would say the coattails of Hegel, and the idea of the motivating world sphere. We've discovered, just like Darwin discovered the secrets of evolution, Karl Marx, have unlocked the secrets of history. It's no longer a mystery, and we can predict what's going to happen with subsequent class revolutions until we have a dictatorship of the proletariat. Well, this has all been retooled. It's all been modified by Mao, and it's been modified by Paulo Freire, who was basically a Maoist. And let me interject here. I should tell you that a lot of this comes out of the postmodern move, Michel Foucault as well. And what people don't realize, and what a lot of the left wingers don't realize, people who like Michel Foucault, that he was a Maoist. He was a Maoist from 1970 to 1974. It's not something he later, boasted about. He would kind of wanted to keep that quiet. But yeah, he embraced the idea of Chairman Mao and his Cultural Revolution at the time. I think that Foucault might have been, as French philosopher, might have been aghast at some of the excesses that later came to light. But yeah, these are all brutal people. And if you'd like me to, at some point during our talk, I can tell you exactly what these folks do when I say brainwash, how they go about doing that. That's something that is rarely explained, I think, when we talk about indoctrination of students. We talk about brainwashing. No one ever explains what it is or how it's done. I'll tell you exactly how it's done.
I do want to get to that, but I just want to show people this real quick, if I may. So just to back up what you're saying, I have heard of this before, that the main attack, if you believe in Marxism, yeah, you could say, well, it's because I want poor people to do better. Okay, all right, I could get that. But there is also these beliefs of the government is family, and you don't need a traditional family. And if anyone's confused about that, I remember when this came out, so Black Lives Matter, and I've gone to Black Lives Matter protests. I don't believe all cops are bad, but I do believe there's a need to reform. However, this page by Black Lives Matter was taken down. Why? It's called What We Believe In. The original leaders of Black Lives Matter, I believe Garza and Colors, put this up, and then they had to take it down within a week because it wasn't popular with African American people because of this right here.
Mm-hmm.
We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families in villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers and parents, our children, are comfortable. So it was up for a second when Black Lives Matter got big. They go, here's what we believe. And then it put all this stuff in there. And a lot of the African American community is like, okay, hold on, remove the family. Embracing the Black family is very important for the African American community. So this page was taken down, and they were like, why did you even bother to put that up? Because they're Marxists. And they literally said that. I'm not trying to discuss the movement. I'm just pointing out this is an example of what the professor's talking about. This is a real thing. So if you believe in Marxism, there is a real coherent component attached to it of, well, then you believe we don't really need families, right? I mean, that's what. And fortunately, a lot of people weren't having it. How do you brainwash? We're winding down, but how do you brainwash? Okay, let's do this. Let's play a game. We're in the elevator again. This time you have 3 minutes. I am a parent, and I'm the federal director of education. I could make education reform happen. I'm a parent. I'm concerned a parent. My kid just started acting weird, and I was talking to you about it. And then I go, I got to go to a meeting in 3 minutes. If you had 3 minutes, what would you tell me is the problem? What are they doing to the students? and what do we stop? And remember, I'm somebody that could make this happen, but I'm so busy. I've never heard of this idea before. First time, how would you explain it to me first time in a way that I get it and have actionable steps to move forward?
Well, first of all, we have to understand what brainwashing is. It's an actual thing. It appears in the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It can be damaging to people. So what is it? It is a psychological manipulation and behavior modification program designed to change a person's belief system. That's what it is. Now, how is it done? Well, on college campuses, these student affairs folks run 3-stage programs in orientations and in seminars called difficult dialogues, called brave spaces, courageous conversations, where step 1, they unfreeze. Step 2, they change the belief system. And step 3, they refreeze the new belief system. The terminology has changed over time. It begins now with defending, surrendering, and transforming. And even now they talk we're going to do 3 stages of education or re-education. And the people that are doing this are the student affairs people. They learn how to do this in their institutes. They learn how to do this from their manuals. Here's one right here, Teaching for Diversity and Social Justice. And you can go to page 72 to 78. It will tell you exactly how to do a 3-stage brainwash program. You can go to this book as well, Promoting Diversity and Social Justice by Diane Goodman, educating people from privileged groups. This is another brainwash manual. Here is another one. All of this appears in Brutal Minds. They take students, they put them at their ease. They don't tell them we're going to brainwash you. They say we're going to play a game here called Privilege Walk or Fishbowl Discussion. They put students at their ease and they obtain trust of the student to reveal information about themselves, about their families, about their parents. And then this is when they put the screws to them. They challenge their belief system. They attack these students based on the information they have provided. And then they offer an alternative belief system that they say, here is the solution to your problem. And then what they call reintegration, or they try to cement the new belief system in place. That's the 3 stages. It was created here in the United States by Kurt Lewin, social psychologist at MIT. It was taken up by the communist Chinese, who absolutely took it to a whole new level because they don't have those pesky individual rights. And today it's used on the college campuses, and the only other folks that use it are cults, American-style cults like the Moonies or Synanon or People's Temple, which use these very same techniques to brainwash students. Does it work all the time? No, some students are better able to resist this type of thing. They know the BS when they see it. Right? But there's a whole segment of students who come into college, they're fearful, they're left home for the first time, they're looking and searching, just like all young people do. They're very susceptible to this type of thing. And that's why students come home after that first time in college to the holiday, the Thanksgiving holiday, and the kids seem so angry and so changed and so attacking the parents for whatever of the moment. This is why. And this is what I teach people how to combat, especially college students, how to turn this around on them, neutralize it, and emasculate these brainwashers, these brutal minds.
I remember the joke for decades of a college student goes to college and they maybe take psychology classes and they come home and they apply some of what they learned to their family. But it was mostly to show off that they're smart and for giggles.
Yeah.
What I've heard in the last 5 years is a story. I'll just record one particular story. Father pays for daughters to go to college. She goes to college. She comes back, pierced everything, purple hair, and hates her father. And their relationship degrades to they don't even talk to each other anymore. And that was after year 1 of going to a college. Now, a lot of people are like, well, that's you as a dad. But I keep hearing other stories about kids coming back and they're just vicious. Not everybody, not every child, not all the time. Of course not. But I never used to hear these stories before the last 5 years. And I keep hearing the same story of my child went to this school that I paid for and they came back and they hate me. They hate me.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do? Like, I love and you know, apparently I'm this bad person. And if I don't immediately jump to agreeing to everything they did, it gets even worse, right? And so the
Yeah.
kids, and you can add to the fact that colleges have been dropping in performance teaching critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That has been routinely applied. So what happens is you get these kids come out and they don't know how to argue and debate. It's just yell, scream, be mad, and how dare you not back up my opinion. And that seems to be ruining some families. Have you heard something like that?
I hear it all the time. I hear that, but the upside of that, the other side of that, is that I've tried to tell parents whose kids are going off to college. They come from, that happen to be a good Christian home and moral upbringing and solid American values. We have nothing to worry about. My kids are well grounded. Well, they don't really want to hear that the college is going to do something to their kids that's going to intentionally attack, destabilize those values, and replace them. Now, this is something that they're not bargaining on. They don't know it. They don't know this is what's going to happen. They think that their kid is going to go off to college and just participate in this wonderful intellectual adventure. And certainly there'll be other ideas that they'll come in contact with, but they're morally grounded. They being the parents, are unaware that there's a group of people on almost every college campus, for the most part, who has a mission. These people have a mission to destabilize that belief system, target that belief system, destabilize it, and replace it with one that's based on Paulo Freirean ideology and critical consciousness. All going back to Karl Marx. And it's basically telling kids to rebel and basically hate your parents. I think many parents understand that this is actually what kids are facing. It's not just a benign environment of different ideas are being bandied about, which is really what the stereotype of the college campus is. I think that there's a subterranean underneath. I call it the viscera of universities. It doesn't have to do with the faculty. It has to do with these. I consider them louts. I consider them brutal minds. If what I've written is true, and I tell myself, if what I've written is true, and it's in their own words, then how could I possibly think well of these people? How could I think of these people other than as brutal minds?
It's not just parents. There's a couple reports out the last 2 years of employers, major Fortune 500 companies. I forget, there was one out of England where it was like one of the top employers in England said, he basically wrote this letter criticizing all English universities and saying, you're producing garbage. Like, I have to rely on what you produce because I'm in England and you're England and you guys are producing garbage. Let me explain. They don't know how to argue. They don't know how to listen to other people's ideas. So it's, I'm right. And if you don't immediately agree with me, there must be something super horribly wrong, evil about you, in which case it's okay for me to just yell and scream at you. That's not my words. These are CEOs of top Fortune 500 companies talking about what's coming out of colleges that they have to depend on for the last 5 years. And they go, yeah, they got the technical skills. They have no idea how to deal with someone who has a different opinion. So this seems to just be not just tearing down families, but cohesion in industry.
Yeah. Well, I will say that what you just described is typical of someone who believes that they have received truth, and this is what is being offered to these young people, this doctrine. And the term I used earlier is called critical consciousness. People who agree with them, people who are on the left, have what they call critical consciousness. This comes from Paulo Freire again. He called it consciência social, which is Portuguese for critical consciousness. Really, it's a bastardization of Karl Marx's idea of class consciousness, but it's updated for the 21st century. Now, the definition of critical consciousness is someone who is now able to peer into the contradictions of society and see the relationships of power and privilege, which is denied to other people like you and me, Mark. And this is a very heady experience for these young college kids who think their parents are stupid because their parents obviously don't have this critical consciousness. And students are they feel there's a kind of a narcissistic attitude toward it. They feel anointed, that they've been admitted into the province of those who know, which is why they can no longer argue. They feel they don't have to argue.
Right.
If you disagree with me and I have this critical consciousness, that means that you, Mark, do not have critical consciousness. You have false consciousness. And this is a kind of a tautology. One is defined in terms of the other. Someone with critical consciousness has emerged from false consciousness. Someone who has false consciousness has not yet emerged into critical consciousness. Now, people who are familiar at all with Western philosophy recognize this as coming from Plato and his Republic, the idea of the allegory of Plato's cave, where
Right.
you know,
Right.
we're only, those of us in the cave are only privy to the knowledge that's granted to us from the shadows on the wall. Someone breaks his chains, goes out into the bright sunlight, and has critical consciousness, which would be a modern way of saying it, and is going to go back into the cave and going to try to bring the college students out into this realm of critical consciousness. It's a very primitive and simplistic way of looking at the world. It kind of dismisses 2,000 years of accumulated knowledge and dismisses the great philosophers and thinkers of time, that this gray bearded sage from Brazil who stole most of his ideas from Karl Marx and Mao Zedong and has been embraced by education schools, that somehow this is the apex of human civilization. I think not. I think not. Give it another try, okay?
I'd encourage everybody there's a couple movies out on the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and I'd encourage people to watch that. It was because they had people who were avowed communists and were part of the system, and then they got rounded up in this thing because they weren't hardcore enough. And it really wasn't about your credentials or your knowledge of communism or what you'd done. It was, you didn't look hardcore enough. And so you got wrapped up in this, and that's very cultish. It wasn't based upon intellectualism or education. It was, Mao may have thought it was, but it got swept up into just fervor, much like the French Revolution. We as humans can do this periodically in every culture on the earth. It's not that unknown. Unfortunately, we are winding down, but I have two more questions for you if you're willing.
Sure.
You've kind of already answered this, but this is one of my favorite ones. You and I are in an elevator, and you have 2 minutes to tell me, and you've already sort of done this, but again, I'm a single parent. I am complaining about, I have difficulty dealing with my child who is just returning freshman from college, and they hate me, and I don't know why. I didn't beat them. I fed them. I loved them. I told them that I loved them. I was a pretty good parent, I thought. I mean, not perfect. And now they hate me. What would you tell that parent as to what's going on and how they fix it in just a few minutes?
Well, when you're telling me, ask me to do this, I prefer the scenario where a parent comes to me and asks me, my kid's going off to college.
Okay.
How can I arm my student other than the upbringing that I've given them all day? Because that's not enough. And that's
fair.
Just not enough.
Fair.
I tell a parent that you have to understand that I've had to deal with this. You have to understand that you've done a great job, but your student is going to be under attack, not in a benign situation, just sharing and carrying all these ideas, under attack. The number one piece of advice, and I wrote this in my blog today, an article just today on brutalminds.com. The number one piece of advice I would give parents and students going off to college is don't give these people your trust. Without your trust, they can't hurt you. The whole element, I should say, the whole activity of the first stage of the 3-stage brainwash is to get you to trust them and to reveal information about your parents, about yourself, about your friends, about your beliefs, social, political, cultural beliefs. Then they will turn all that information and use that against you. And they're very good at this because they do it all the time, again and again. Every year they do this. They get better and better at it. Start out by don't give them, ask yourself, why should I trust this person? And you'll find anytime someone is saying, hey, trust me, I'm going to reveal something to you. I'm going to disclose, and you can disclose to me. Make yourself vulnerable. These are the phrases they use. I'm not making this up. This is what they say.
Right.
I want you to make yourself vulnerable. Ask yourself, turn your critical faculties on and say, why is this person trying to get me to talk about my family? Why does this person desperately want my trust? That's the kind of person you desperately want to distrust. Okay, that's the number one piece of advice. And I go from there and I give a whole host of advice. My advice for someone who's, again, going back to your original question, who is coming home and angry, is to engage with that student and with the information that you find in Brutal Minds, and show that you yourself, the parent, you know what that student has gone through, and say, did they do this? Did they do that? Is Paulo Freire mentioned as part of Beyond? Is this where you're coming from? Because that's a very cramped and primitive and poverty-stricken kind of philosophy. One that is very poor in terms of running your life. Let's talk about that.
Your plan is to educate the parents so they can audit the educators.
What I would do is I would do that. But the plan is to arm the student and have the parent be the one arming the student with that information. Here's what you can expect, because they're going to come after you. And of course, the parents and donors and alumni and boards of trustees can all act in concert to expunge the university from these louts and their entire and hire a bunch of ancillary support staff who want to do their jobs and with the students' best interests at heart.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being an administrator, but you're not an educator. You're an administrator. That's your job. Let's not pretend we're something not. I mean, it's just every time. The whole time you were talking, I kept thinking of Jill Biden, the president's wife, and how the news calls her Dr. Biden. And they literally had people think she was a medical doctor. And then a year into it, they had to go, no, she's not a medical doctor. Because they go, well, Dr. Biden watches after presidents' injections and stuff. And I'm like, so they gave this message. I said, no, you're not a medical doctor at all. You have a degree in education, which is an impressive achievement, but that is not medicine.
It's part of the upselling. You find it all the time. They're trying to say, you need to believe me, and they don't expect you to question them.
Yeah, and I'm like, you're not a doctor. You are a doctor of education. That is not the same thing. Last question. You don't have to answer, but we always ask, do you have any recommendations? Do you know anybody else who might be willing to have an honest conversation about political polarization? They could be on the left. They could be on the right. We don't care. You don't have to answer, but you can answer later. I'll email you.
I do have someone in mind, and I'm not going to put his name out on the air.
Of course,
I'll let him put his name out on the air, but I'm happy to recommend him to talk with you. And he'll say he's an English professor, and so he might have some insights from the humanities side of the house.
That'll be awesome. I will email you today with a copy of the video on the podcast, and I'll ask for the recommendation then. For everybody watching, Brutal Minds, you can see it right there. That's the website in the background. That's BRUTALMINDS.com. I went there. You can look at the book. You can read blog posts. You can read about sections of the book. I did a lot of the prepping for the questions for this interview based upon just the information on this website. It's very informative, and it will walk you through a lot of the concepts even before you get the book. Obviously, the book is going to be the mainstay, but this website was a wealth of knowledge, in my opinion. Brutalminds.com. I encourage everybody to check it out. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Professor, thank you for coming out.
My pleasure.
I will email you shortly, and I really appreciate your time, sir.
I love to talk. My wife will tell you that. I love to talk. Someone to listen to me is the problem, right? Well, thanks, Mark. I'm glad we connected and able to do this.
I really appreciate it. I'll email you a copy shortly, and I want to say thank you again for your time, sir.
Sure, my pleasure. And I think you put it up on YouTube, right?
Yep.
And I'll link to that on my LinkedIn, so you'll get even more viewers, I hope.
Nice. Yeah, I'll send you a copy from my YouTube channel very soon, and we'll go from there.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Take care now.
Take care.